Hello, everyone, and welcome to the NextGen Planners podcast. My name is Dan, and I'm the head of community here at NextGen Planners. And today, I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by a good friend, Mr. Dan Haylett from TFP Financial Planning. How are you doing today, Dan?
Wonderful, Dan. Lovely to see you, Dan and Dan. This is going to be interesting.
It is.
No, great to be here.
We had another person on the podcast a few weeks ago called Danielle. And it's just becoming a bit ridiculous now. We'll keep on having Dan Squared podcasts, and we'll definitely branch out a little bit out of the names, shouldn't we? But yeah, it's fantastic to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us. So for anyone in the audience who doesn't know Dan, I'm assuming that a lot of people in the audience will know Dan. But if you don't know Dan, he's a financial planner and director at TFP Financial Planning. So what we do always like to do, Dan, to kick things off is to get our guests to tell us a little bit about what it is that they get up to on a daily basis. So what do you do every day?
Um, yes, it's a really great question to kick off. I mean, it's so varied. I think everyone would say that. But on a daily basis, it's very much thinking about two things really. So it's the future direction and growth of our business, and also dealing with our wonderful client families that we have. And I'm primarily responsible for taking on most of the new client families that come to us at TFP. So I'm very engaged in, and I hate the word, but I'm going to say it, very engaged in the onboarding process. But I'm very engaged and thoughtful of those initial contacts that our potential new families that we work with have with us, and whether it be through from website to conversations to phone calls to Zoom calls to meetings, that initial process that we might get into that we've done a bit of work on, that's kind of really where I'm really focused on as I take on these new clients and then deliver the future growth of this business through our communications. And again, not really a big fan of the word marketing as such, but communications and us really getting our values and what we stand for out into the wider world.
Fantastic. I love how whenever you referred, I mean, it's I don't know if it's an active thing that you're doing or whether it's just something that you say, but when you refer to clients, you refer to them as client families. And I think that's a lovely term, and it really humanizes the thing that we're working with people here, but we're not only working with one person, we're working with entire families and communities around those people that we work with. And it's such a refreshing thing to hear. I've heard a lot of people call their client, I think you guys do as well, you call your client what would traditionally be called a client bank, which is an awful term, by the way, and we should never use that. We're now verging into calling them client communities, client groups. Even client list is better than saying client bank, because client bank is just an awful term. And I think actively trying to get away from that is lovely to hear as well. And it's so different to what we've been used, or what traditional financial advice looks like. And that brings us nicely on to the next question, because you've been in financial planning for a little while now. I mean, I believe that before financial planning, you were in asset management, weren't you?
Yeah.
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 So if you could think like back to when you started in financial planning and when you got going in this profession, it probably even wasn't even being referred to as a profession back then. What would you say has changed the most since then? Like, what have you seen change over those years?
Yeah, I think it kind of goes back to what you just said, and I think it actually goes back to before I joined. So I'm kind of 5 years in to being a financial planner, but my career before that, kind of a good 10, 12 years before that, was spent dealing with financial advisors. So, I would tour around the country, worked for some of the biggest investment houses in the UK in sales and distribution, heading up sales teams and touring around and speaking to financial advisors for a good 10 years plus. So my understanding of how this thing that we do, that's now, I'm very proud to say that there's a small but growing and hardcore bunch of professionals that are here now. It does go back to almost pre-RDR when I first started talking to financial advisors. And I think, the couple of the biggest shifts for me has been the sense of professionalism by us as individuals. So I think it's a bit like, I play golf and I try and look like Tiger Woods and swing like Tiger. It doesn't always happen. But I think if you look, feel, act, and it comes across well, right? So I think I'm seeing more and more people want to act and establish businesses like a proper professional service industry now, which has been a big shift. I think also there's obviously, and I'm pretty passionate about fixed fees. I may get my tin hat on and we can go there if we want, maybe not. But I think we're all seeing a growing band of people that understand that this is more than a client family's money. This is more than their money. This is their life. And we charge on service, not on wealth, which is a wonderful thing. And one of the reasons I joined TFP was their willingness to listen to my views, having spent the last 10, 12 years seeing the good, the bad, and the ugly of the wider financial advice industry. I had some real, quite purposeful views about how I believe life-changing financial planning should be delivered. So, and then lastly, which we'll probably get onto, I think it comes back to your point, right, about humans. We deal with humans. We don't deal with money. Humans are storytellers, not calculators. We can put spreadsheets in front of them, but decisions aren't made on spreadsheets. They're made around the dinner table. This is, I think, the evolution towards understanding that, yes, we have a technical ability, but really that technical ability does not change the client's lives. Our ability to understand them deeply and to align their purpose with their accumulated wealth. It doesn't have to be money, it can be other assets. I love hearing stories and seeing stories of how this is impacting people's lives, because that's the true impact that we have. I said to someone the other day, actually, I'm not a therapist, but I deliver therapy. I'm not a counsellor, but I deliver counselling. There's definitely some pastoral care going on as well that we deliver. So, and I think the openness for a wonderful group of people to learn about this stuff, not just be stuck in a book that shows you how to do calculations, is wonderful to see in our profession. I've probably gone on too long, but I can speak.
No, the way you finished there was perfect. Because that is the real value. If ever we think about like, oh, I don't know what value I offer to, I don't know what value I offer to my clients. You've just outlined it all there, like pretty much I've said this in the past on the podcast, but like I can't think of any other professional who knows as much about their clients' lives, or anyone really who knows as much about their clients' lives than financial planners do. There's things that when I used to work in a financial planning firm that I've heard that their clients' friends and family have never even heard them say before. And it just and it just shows, I mean, certainly it shows the transition from this kind of idea of financial advice to life planning and financial planning, which is amazing. But it also shows the kind of link between money and personality and personal. Like money is extremely personal. And when you get someone talking about their money, other things start to come out, like a lot more things start to come out that they've never even told anyone else before.
Yeah.
And it's so nice to hear. And you've actually, I mean, people who are listening won't be able to see, but you've got 4 Carl Richards sketches behind you there, and those clearly come into a lot of what you think as well. And that I mean, the whole idea with the behavior gap is that people make decisions based on their emotions, like you said before about they don't make decisions based on spreadsheets or reports or anything like that. They make decisions on their intrinsic motivations and things that happen in their heads, and it's so different to what. Again, I've said this before again, but like so different to what financial advice used to be like 40 years ago.
And I think it's so different to the perception that's still out there. And I think one of the biggest challenges that we have, and the wonderful work that you guys do and the community you're building, is I think the biggest challenge is to kind of redefine that with the public, right? I mean, it's, we should be shouting from the rooftops about the work that we do. We should have queues coming out of our door. We should have far too many people wanting to work with us. And the reality is we don't, because of that we're still all lumped in this one great big kind of bowl of financial people, and so I think the conversations we have are phenomenal. I think I've got couples that have been married for 30 years that have never had. They have a conversation in our office they've never had before. You can facilitate those kind of conversations, and like you said, the privilege that I feel by being able to facilitate those conversations and make a difference is so aligned with purpose for me. And I just don't get why anyone would want to abuse that position. And so, because we can ultimately change the direction and the course for people. And I think it's until you go through it, and you sit either the couple that we work with or us as the people that are working with them, until you're kind of in that mix and go through it, I don't think anyone can truly understand. That's why I'm so passionate about getting our couples and families to tell their story. It can only come from them, right?
It can. Yeah, absolutely can. And we've got a lot of work to do to raise that reputation. And there's a lot of different ways that we can do that. But I feel like it starts by just I mean, this sounds awfully cliche to say, but it starts with those little ripples, and it starts with those little steps of, if you make a huge difference to one client family's life, they'll tell 3 or 4 of their friends. And if every single financial planner in the UK could do that, we'd have no problem, because eventually it would get out there. And we're not going to change this overnight, but with little steps we can get there. And I guess you mentioned there before about that, well, I mean, this is the whole thing of that the general public doesn't really understand what financial planners do, or they've got the misconception about what financial planning actually is. But I also think that people who are starting off in the profession, as in they've just joined and they're maybe qualifying to be a financial advisor or financial planner, whatever you want to call them, they perhaps don't really understand it yet as well. So if you could think back to those 5 years, and if you could go back and tell yourself, or if you could tell anyone in the audience now who is starting off as a financial planner, things that will get them off to a really, really good start and things that they should know, what would those be? What would you tell them?
Yeah, again, I have a pretty forthright view about this that may not fly with everybody, but I would get, once you're qualified to the standard that you need to be, go and burn all those textbooks on a bonfire. Forget about the technical ability that you have learned. And I'm going to one end of the extreme here. So there's a middle ground. But forget about the technical ability you've learned and truly learn about human beings.
Yeah.
Learn about behaviors, learn about biases, learn about great listening, learn about how to hold court in a meeting. That doesn't mean that you talk all of the time either. Learn, there are some wonderful people that have got amazing technical ability that I know that will never sit in front of a client because they can't hold the meeting, right? So I think technical ability is obviously important, but I think with the advent of technology and cash flow and all of the things here, that the need to create a spreadsheet from scratch and understand how to put it all in and what calculations do what and tax and all this, it's all done for us. Right? I mean, we just need to understand how it works. We obviously need some understanding around some of the intricacies around pensions and etc. But it all becomes quite patterny, right? I'm a big fan. If you deal with the same people day in, day out, you recognize a pattern in a lot of them. You bespoke that pattern around, but you have to really learn about the human. I would spend more of my time early on learning about humans, how we work, our brains, why we have the kind of relationship with money. I would learn about my own money story earlier. I think it's really important to probably, if you're starting out, to write your own money script. So go back to your childhood, go back to your own thoughts and feelings about money, because I think unless you can really get comfortable with your own biases and your own thoughts and your own emotions with money, then you may not be in a great position to feel like you can go that deep with someone sitting in front of you. That would be a big tip for me.
I agree. And perhaps maybe a bit softer, but I think they don't perhaps need to be mutually exclusive. So I think you can be training towards, let's say, being a chartered financial planner and getting those level 6 qualifications, but whilst also doing something like the registered life planner course from George Kinder, or the other like amazing courses that are out there, like the Shaping Wealth course that you will talk about in a bit.
Yeah.
Because then you've got like this all round, you've not only got the technical knowledge, but you've also, like you said, got the understanding of how the human brain works and how clients feel when they're actually coming to see you, because that's the stuff that you do every day. You know, how many times a day do you do a tax calculation? Well, but I mean, you're shaking your head. I mean, because like you said, we've got the technology there now that does it for us.
Yeah.
So,
and I think you put it wonderfully. I mean, I've gone to one end to try and get the point across. I think
yeah,
I'm not saying get rid of all the technical, but I think lots of people. What lots of people do is they go RO1 to RO6, go chartered, get that, and then move on. Like you said, no. Really, I think it should be you should try and do this in line with one another. I think training should be aligned with both technical, and it's this soft and hard skills thing is rubbish. I think that needs to be flipped around, right? I think the hard skills are the stuff that we're talking, it's not soft communication skills. They're really hard. So we should spend a lot of time learning those kind of things.
Yeah. I agree with you. I think they're just skills, to be honest. I don't think soft and hard skills really exist. They're just skills, like things that you need to be a successful financial planner.
Yeah,
Because that's the stuff that you'll be doing every day. So, before we move on to the kind of behavioral finance stuff, which I'm really excited to talk to you about, and the things that you've been doing recently, I just want to talk about the people that you've been working with, or that you work with on a daily basis. So, I mean, because we're working with you at the moment, I know that you work with successful people who are retiring in the next 5-10 years, and I hope I've characterized that correctly. But like, I'm just interested because that's a lot of people in the audience will also work with that group of people. But I'm just interested in your perspectives on, like, what are they going through? Those people that you work with, what do they talk to you about on a daily basis? What are their main worries, concerns? And I guess just for the people in the audience as well, like, what should they be aware of that those people who you work with are going through at the moment?
Yeah. So I love working with those kind of people because I think those kind of people are as psychologically, what's the word I'm looking for, in limbo as any group of people, right? So I try and put myself in their shoes. And I've done a mini version of this when I went from investment management and jumped over to financial planning, right? I jumped off the treadmill. I retired from my career in investment management and moved on to something else that had more purpose, right? It's no real different transition to someone kind of thinking about stepping back from a long, successful career that they've earned good money and they've kind of been wed to, whether rightly or wrongly or positively or negatively. So I think for me, so the challenges really that they face is this move away from a career that's delivered everything for them to understanding what purpose looks like beyond work. So I think removing the retirement phrase is a big thing for the conversations that we have with these people. There's a lot of psychology about how they're going to spend their money and time with freedom. And I've read a lot about that. And I think we have to understand that the challenges they face goes back to their childhood. So one of the questions I ask people when I first started working with them is around anti-goals. So I'm a massive believer that it's easier for us to establish what we don't like and don't want than it is for us to establish what we're trying to achieve. And bar none, if I ask someone kind of, if you observed anything that you don't want to happen in your family and friends when they've retired, or is there anything that you really, really don't want to happen in your, once you stop work, the list goes on, right? I can't stop them talking. If I ask them what they want to achieve, they're stuck because they haven't thought about what they're going to. they've thought about what they're coming from and all the challenges there. So it goes back to childhood. Oh, my granddad never spent his money, so I want to make sure that I'm not as I'm more spending my money than he is because I saw him just dwindle away on his sofa. Or another one, my parents just blew all their money and run out of money at age 77, and we're still supporting them. And so you have to understand the psychological challenges that these people have. And so going back there, understanding what they don't like and what they don't want, and establishing that and working with them to understand how we can then show them that they don't have to go there. And then I think really looking about giving them the freedom to spend their money and time on what's most important to them, no matter what. And establishing on that basis what they're retiring to, not from. I think Mitch Anthony talks about this a lot, and it's something I've really taken on board. And we do an exercise with people that looks at their vision for retirement and what they're going to. So what are the things that you do in work, non-financial, that give you a bit of buzz and give you a purpose? What are the things you're going to miss? How are you going to replace those? Because we hear it all the time, right? You hear people that retire and then go back to work 2 years later because they just haven't really established what they're going to do. And that's not great, because I'm massively passionate about this window of spending opportunity. And when we create our financial plans for people, there's a window there that's fixed, and it ends at 72 and it starts when they stop work. But if you're when they're financially independent, if you're financially independent and free at age 60, but you continue working because you just don't know how much is enough and how you're going to do it, and you're fearful, you're 5 years into your window of spending opportunity. You've just wasted time when you could have been doing other things that are more important to you. So I think the challenge they have is around having a vision for it. They haven't had anyone to sit down and talk to this about. They don't sit down together as a couple because I think their visions are different. And some of the greatest feedback I've had is that I've been able to sit down, understand the differences in vision, give people the couples the confidence to follow their own individual path, whilst also understanding what they want to do together. So you have these kind of 3 different strands, 2 different purposes plus the combined family purpose. I've had some wonderful feedback that they've never had those conversations before, and it's give them the comfort to go and plan things now because they understand what their shared vision looks like. So yeah, that's again, I could go on for hours.
I never want to stop you when you talk about this kind of stuff. It's the anti-goals is so powerful. You're actually the second person I've heard talk about that, and I don't know why I've only heard that twice, because that is such a powerful thing. Because it's looking into animal behavior. Really, humans are animals, and even the most risk-taking human beings, ultimately they've still got that fight or flight thing in them. Like, they've still got the thing of, I would probably rather avoid danger rather than taking it on. So all asking that question is doing is striking up that fight or flight kind of thing in your brain of, oh my God, I've got a million things that I don't want to happen before I can even start to think about the 10 things that I want to happen in my retirement. And by doing that, it's almost like that. This is a massively overused thing in my opinion, but the Maslow's hierarchy of needs and the way it's applied to financial planning, it's almost like starting at that bottom of, okay, well, you've got to get those worries out of the way. You've got to be safe first before you can move anywhere higher up that hierarchy of needs. Whereas a lot of people will probably start by asking questions that are at the top of that pyramid, which is self-actualization, rather than starting at the bottom of the pyramid, which is, what do you really not want to happen, and how can we stop that from happening?
I think that's absolutely.
And when often the best part of a financial plan, from the ones I've seen, are the stress testing and the disaster scenarios of saying, in case of emergency, we can show you on this cash flow chart here that even if the worst was to happen, even if your husband was to pass away, or even if you lost your job, you would still be financially stable. And that is like, whoa, if someone told me that, like that would be absolutely incredible. Like it
I
is.
agree. I agree. I say to people a lot, like, the first stage, we're going to go quite deep. It might get quite morbid, and it's quite a lonely place sometimes, right? But we have to
Mm,
go here to start with, because if you're telling me you want these things, but these things are the things that really challenge your mind and give you fear and keep you up at night, then what I'm going to do, my utmost, is to show you that if these things happen, you're okay,
mm,
or how these things won't happen, and challenge those. And then, because freedom will never be, whether we call it financial freedom, life freedom, in my opinion, I don't think you'll ever feel completely free if these things, the little devil on your shoulders nagging at you all the time. Don't get me wrong, we're never going to get rid of it in 2 meetings. That's why ongoing planning is so important. We can start to shrink it, and we can start to, but then they know that they like, the families I deal with know that they can come to me with the devil on their shoulder, and we can have a great conversation about it, and I can help them with that devil. And that devil will appear, or the little thing, the little fear, or the anxiety will appear as we go on. Because money's a lightning rod, right? Money is the number one cause of stress out there. Of course, it causes us stress, and we don't talk about it with family and friends. So the ability to have us sitting here to have a conversation about those fears as they come about, I mean, talking about delivering value, I don't, that's it, right? I mean, that ongoing piece. So yeah, it's huge for the couples that we, having the trust to have that conversation with someone is massive.
yeah, absolutely is. And it leads that I'm really actually I'm just gonna say I'm really glad I asked that question, because we don't normally ask questions like that on the podcast, but it's got so much out of what we've just asked, what we've just talked about there. Because like that is actually what clients are feeling, and that's the most important thing about everything that we do is clients. So we do need to understand how they're feeling before we can do anything,
Yeah.
and that's been really helpful. And that leads nicely on to also what we want to talk about, which is this growing area in financial planning. Certainly in the United States, it's growing in popularity here in the UK as well, of this behavioral finance area, and it's absolutely fascinating. Anything to do with the brain is always fascinating, but especially when it's linked to money as well. And you've just completed the Shaping Wealth course with um, Brian Portnoy and Neil Beige, and I think a few others as well, which is great. So it kind of leads like onto the last question. But what kind of things what kind of things have you picked up on that course and through your study of behavioral finance? How does that kind of change the way that you work with clients, or how does it come into those conversations now that you're having with clients on a daily basis?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've touched on it a bit, right? It's kind of some of
Yeah.
these things that we've already talked about. Understanding that there's a human being sitting in front of us, it is kind of a big challenge. But I think, look, and I'm going to take some of the things that Brian, Neil, and Joy have said in Shaping Wealth and probably do it a complete disservice. But I think we need to stop treating behavioral biases and behavioral finance like a kind of a one of our tools in our toolbox, right? They're taken. I absolutely subscribe to this. I think, and one thing I've really learned is that behavioral finance is like oxygen. It's there, and if we don't recognize it's there, this is not a kind of a cash flow modeling system. This is not kind of there's a piece of software that allows us to identify people's behavioral biases. The worst thing you can do is go into someone into a meeting, go, oh, by the way, you're demonstrating loss aversion, and in order to get over loss aversion, it's nuts, right? And that's how I think the first iteration of behavioral finance was done on that. Here's a list of 56 biases. I need to have a look at which ones that you're demonstrating, and then figure out a way to get over it. BFI 2.0, as they've called it, is like it's everywhere. It's oxygen. We need to understand that humans are perfectly rational. We are rational beings that make rational decisions based on our stories and our understanding. Other people might call them irrational, but that's rubbish, because they're perfectly rational for how we are wired as individuals. And so how I work with client is really just, there's a couple of things really. From an empathy point of view, they've got a wonderful piece of learning from their empathy protocol, how to be truly present and empathetic on an ongoing basis, not just in meetings, in body language and communications and preparation. Is a game changer. I think, yeah. So, I mean, that they've got the building behavioral advisor course they've got has been not only transformational for me as a financial planner, but as a person and a human being. I feel like I'm a more understanding person. I understand my own self more. I understand my wife and my kids more. They probably won't even say that, but I think I do. I understand people that sit in front of me on a daily basis more, my team members, because it's oxygen. It is everywhere. And I think one of the biggest learnings that course is a wonderful cohort-based course that you get to meet with a bunch of people that are on the same journey, and the way that they've structured it to learn together it's just phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. But this whole thing that we need to be less mechanic and more guide, right? So it comes back to what we said before. We are guides to our clients' lives. We can be mechanics, but the mechanic thing doesn't change their life, right? The guide thing does. And the ability to really embrace that this stuff is everywhere in our clients' lives. They're getting fed noise from the papers and from their friends and their past life and everything like that. And to not feel like any decisions that they have or anything they want to talk about is anything other than completely rational for them as individuals. And I think you kind of know that, right? I mean, but the ability to practice it and some of the things that they teach on the course allow you to practice this stuff is really, really important. So, yeah, I think it's going to change. It's going to change our profession. I really do. They've got another thing coming out called the Outsourced Chief Behavioural Officer, where there is ongoing support from that team to help you communicate effectively with clients in a human-centric way. That's we can't. Again, their big thing is that humans are storytellers, not calculators. We don't want to chuck numbers at them. We need to tell stories to make an impact.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a glowing recommendation there for sharing wealth.
Yeah, it sounds like I don't work for them. I'm not on any kickback. It's just, I think, look, it's just had such a positive impact on me. The guys that I've got to know very well, it's probably had the biggest impact on me on anything that I've undertaken ever, really, I think. And so that's why I'm really kind of forthright about how it's helped me.
Yeah, it's great to hear. And the whole human centered thing is something which is just, I think it's a hygiene factor, really. Like, as in, like, financial planning is dealing with humans. It's not dealing with machines. And I think that's something that a lot of us, well, not a lot of us, but a lot of, shall we say, traditional advice firms forget that thing of you're talking to humans here, who have real fears and worries that are nothing at all related to the products that they have in their daily lives. They're not their intrinsic worries and fears that are in their heads. I think once you understand that, it really does open up a whole new world of what we do, which is just it's like an enlightenment. It's really, really good.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've got two big questions to ask you, which are kind of linked together.
Okay.
So we've never asked this one on the podcast before, so let's see how it goes.
Guinea pig.
Yeah, so I'm going to be a genie, I think, and I'm going to give you 3 wishes to change the world of financial planning forever and ever and ever. What today, right now, what would you wish for? Those 3 wishes.
I would wish for less. So these two things go hand in hand. This is one. less regulation, which would create more innovation and less worry about what you're innovating. That would be one. Or better regulation, maybe. Should I say that rather than less regulation?
I think that's an Elvis Presley song, isn't it?
Is it? Oh, yeah.
A little less regulation, a little more innovation.
Don't ask me to sing, please. So that, I think, I'd want to have something that allows us. There's a group of people that I think I've got wonderful brains that I think could innovate well beyond where we're going, but there's lots of stuff holding us back, which I think would be wonderful. I think the ability for us to all want to have this side to the business that looks in depth at our clients' behaviours. So I would want, we've got HR and compliance and all of that stuff. I think having having the ability to access experts to understand how the way that we communicate with clients can impact their behaviours. To look through that would be wonderful. And if I could wave one magic wand, I'd want everybody to somehow overnight truly understand the impact that we have on the clients' lives. Somehow, I would, if everyone understood it. I'm not saying it's right for everybody. I'm not saying everybody would go and get the services of a world-class financial planner, but I think the impact that our messages can have can go far beyond the services that we deliver to individuals and couples. And I think there's some great stuff being done already on this, but I'd love more time and ability to feel like you're spreading the message wider and actually dealing with more and more people as we go down kind of the levels of wealth, if you want to say that, as they're starting. Is that good enough for those three?
Yeah, I think that last one is a brilliant one. I think it's the biggest one. But I've often asked this question actually on the podcast of people, and I said, like, if we could educate, it's kind of linked, but if we could educate the general public on finances and they could know the things that we want them to know, imagine the impact that could have on our society. Not just in terms of economical, but in terms of everything, like happiness, in terms of relationships with other people. Money is often one of the biggest causes of fighting between people. So imagine if we could have a better financial literacy rate in the UK. I'm just in a utopian world. I'm just thinking, I let my brain go crazy sometimes and think of all the things that would be better if everyone just had even a basic level of knowledge about their money.
Yeah,
I think it would be fantastic. And this next question is kind of linked, but I want to know about things that are actually happening now. So we ask everyone this question, but if we could if we think back to how financial planning was 10 years ago today, so what was that, October 2020 or 2012? It's very different to how it is today. But I'm interested in the next 10 years. So what are you seeing happening today that you're very, very excited about, that you think will be really big over the next 10 years?
Yeah, I think this, look, for me, a confidence in what we do and what we deliver is definitely on the rise. So I think, people are very confident about the value that we deliver, and therefore are standing firm to their values and how they deliver the service. And kind of on that, I suppose I'm excited to see the movement to a fixed fee for service model that can be either toned down or toned up dependent on who we deal with in a specific category of people, whether it's age, demographic, or whatever it looks like. I would like to see professional financial planners charge fixed fees, and the industry can go and do what they want and hopefully get called out and dwindled out. So, I think no matter, that would be the biggest thing, I think. And we've already seen this. I mean, when we first launched our fixed fee model nearly 5 years ago, we were having people kind of contact us going, well, how have you done that? And I'm thinking about doing it. And, you know, and we were one of only a handful, but now there's more and more and more monthly subscription, you know, based on the service that we're going to deliver for your situation, and not just because you got 2 million in the bank or 200,000 in the bank, or you're just starting off on your journey. So I think if we can get in our head that we are confident, comfortable professionals that charge a fee for a world-class service that has massive value, that is completely independent from anything to do with products, then I think we'll be in a wonderful position over the next 5 or 10 years to take it even further beyond that. Brilliant.
Great answer. I love asking that question because it just gets everyone excited about what's coming over the next 10 years. It can be very kind of tempting to get down about some of the things that happen in our profession and just in wider society. And when we hear things like that, that really does kind of focus on on why we wake up every day to do these things, which is great. And we always like to ask our guests for a book that has helped them in their career so far. I've stretched it out a little bit recently, so it's because I realized that, I mean, I'm one of the people who doesn't really read books. So I've stretched it out to things like podcasts or even films or pieces of music or anything that has helped them in their career. What would you recommend our audience consume?
So this was really hard for me to think about because I've got 3 books. So can you allow me to have 3? Is that all right?
Oh, of course. I mean, we've had people give like 5 or 6 before. Oh, so wonderful. I mean, the rules are out the window nowadays.
Cool. So yeah, excellent. So I'm a big reader, and interestingly, kind of been a big reader since I didn't read a lot up until getting into financial planning, and then got the bug for it. So 3 books. One of them is Enough by Paul Armisen, which we give out to all of our clients. We've kind of worked with Paul to brand up the book and have a PDF copy of it. And it's been a wonderful read for us and our team members, but also an amazing thing for our clients. It's had such a positive impact. Not every chapter is relevant for everybody, but it's simple, understandable, a bit like Paul, to the point and quite blunt. And yeah, that's had a big impact. So it's one of the first books I read really to kind of coming into this. So that would be one. And then the other 2 would be around the behavioral stuff. So Dr. Daniel Crosby's The Behavioral Investor is an amazing book. And if you haven't read it, you need to get a hold of it and read it. It's just a wonderful, wonderful piece of writing, and listen to his Standard Deviations podcast. And he's a great guy. And then I've got to finish off on More Shaping Wealth, Love. But no, how I got into kind of knowing Brian, I read The Geometry of Wealth, which is, again, just a phenomenal piece of writing. And during lockdown, I was a bit cheeky and thought I'll send him a quick email and see if he wants to have a chat about stuff. And we struck up a real good friendship over Zoom during lockdown. But yeah, those 3 books, I think, that has been massively influential on my thought process about how we work with clients and how best to deliver this stuff to them.
Awesome. 3 really good books, actually. I can't guarantee that. I can't say to the audience that I've read all of them, but they've definitely been recommended before on the podcast, and I know how much impact they've had on people's lives. So really, really good stuff. Well, I think we'll finish it there because we've been talking now for almost 3/4 of an hour, which is crazy how time flies. But we do always like to give the last word on our podcast to the guest to say a big thank you for coming on. So can you tell our audience where to find you, how to connect with you, and leave us with any last words that you've got as well?
Thanks, Dan. It's been awesome. I love, I could talk about this stuff for hours, and we know that would bore most people. So it's good to cut it off. But yeah, I'm on Twitter. I'm very active on LinkedIn. Someone I played golf with the other day, who's connected me on LinkedIn, said that the power stations are going to get a rest because I'm on the golf course for 4 hours. So I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, trying to connect up. I try and keep my LinkedIn mostly towards client stuff, but happy to connect with other people. But I think Twitter's a great place at the moment. It can be a cesspool, but I think the community of FinTwit people is wonderful globally. So I learn a lot from there. So yeah, at Dan Haylett is my handle on Twitter. That would be great to connect with anyone on there.
Good stuff. Yeah, I agree with you actually. It does get a bad reputation, but there are some great people doing some fantastic things on FinTwit, as we call it, especially
Yeah,
in the US as well. Some great stuff coming out from over there.
yeah.
Fantastic. Well, we'll finish it there, but thank you so much, Dan. It's been a pleasure chatting with you today. So that was Dan Haylett from TFP Financial Planning on the Next Gen Planners podcast. If you enjoyed this podcast, people can find it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts, and also our website, which is nextgenplanners.co.uk, where you'll find more information about all the cool things we're up to at the moment. Our conference tickets, which will have probably gone live by the time this podcast gets released for next year. Our crowdfunding campaign that we're on with at the moment, and all of the other cool things that we do in NextGen, including the amazing community of which Dan is a member. And we are on social media, of course, as well. So you can find us on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. And we would love to connect with you guys on there. And finally, I will just say, if you could just subscribe to us, give us a follow, and also, if you get a chance, a rate and review. That really helps us grow the podcast and take it to the next level. But that's it from us today. So I must say a big thank you once again to Dan for joining us. Thank you guys for listening, as always, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.